Hello.
There we go. Oh my God. How much better did that work the second time around?
Oh, way better. I just
Yeah.
had to, you gave me a crash course in it there.
Yeah. We were already running up against the clock, man. So that
Yeah.
crash course was absolutely. I mean, you had to. Wait, hold on. We're gonna have to talk about the scrubs first. Let's go. We got to go straight scrubs. Are you just more comfortable overall, both physically and just like, reputationally? Are you just more comfortable in scrubs?
It gives you this air of legitimacy.
Yes,
for some
it
reason,
does. Absolutely.
And I had to choose between like shaving my head or showering and changing. So I went with shaving my head. So
you did. You have a different look than when I saw you the other day.
Well, that was a wig. Thanks for bringing it up.
It was the thinnest wig I've ever seen, man. But it certainly got the job done. It was your summer poolside wig.
That's right.
Love that you're going. Dean May would be very proud of you going V-neck scrubs. You're not going for neck. You're not going to go with any of those lowly stylish scrubs. Okay. So everybody, obviously we have a medical professional here, an MD, a doctor, someone who has done amazing things for a lot of people that I know. A lot of people swear by this man. They say that he has helped them smooth out years and years of rough living, to say the least. And without Dr. Nathan Ford, I mean, they'd already be back in old folks 30s.
Dean May in particular. I mean, he's the model poster child of the Ford Wellness Center. So
he's a model in many ways, and don't worry, we will be getting to him shortly.
Amazing.
But into your why we're here and what we're gonna the topics at hand. Dr. Ford, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I went to med school at UCLA, the Drew program. Charles Drew University is one of the only historically Black medical colleges. So shout out to Drew, and shout out to UCLA for partnering with Drew many years ago to create this awesome program. So that's what brought me to LA. The rest is a long, terrible story, but no.
Skip through a few years until what you're doing right now, treating a variety of patients in Los Angeles. Yeah. Everyone from the the more health conscious, and a lot of the people that that we socialize with, who may be very much conscious and integrate a lot of wellness into their day-to-day existence, and contrasted against some people who are lower income, frontline workers, or people who may be a little higher risk just based on lifestyle.
Absolutely. So yeah, I have a huge dichotomy in my practice, and a lot of people know me for my practice in Beverly Hills, where I treat a broad range of people, but mostly, just like you said, people who are typically a little more health conscious, or taking the initiative to go beyond just I'm healthy, I know I don't have any chronic disease, but I'm fatigued, or I'm overweight a little bit, or I'm not sleeping well. I'm not at the top of my game. How do I live longer? How do I live stronger? So there's that subset, which I enjoy. I have a lot of friends who I've met through there, a lot of wonderful people. The majority of patients I see, a lot of people don't know, are really the workers of the world, the socioeconomic underserved. I travel to 3 different locations in LA County, one South LA County, Long Beach, and downtown, and just some fantastic people, and fantastic staff there as well that I work with. And a lot of this is education, and I think health education equals really empowerment. And if we really focus on empowering each other, and especially in the world of health, the outcomes are just so much better. If we're doing more than just spending that 5 minutes or 10 minutes and writing a prescription and, criticizing or scolding, why aren't you taking your diabetes med? Why aren't you taking your blood pressure med? Instead, educating, providing the tools, providing the background, you really find that people, they want to be healthier. And they kind of like we were talking about before, if you give people benchmarks and tangible goals, they meet those little goals piece by piece. That's really what creates long-lasting change in health, and that's really what I've you know, what I've prided myself in practice.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's awesome. And I think you make a really interesting point that look at just the body of knowledge around health and wellness that has accelerated and accrued in you know, the world that we live in over the past 14 to 15 years.
Sure.
We're already, let's call it 2005. West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, higher income people, extremely health conscious, always looking to live better, be healthier, other than, you know, maybe after 11 p.m. But obviously they were looking to, they were at the forefront, the top, the highest decile or percentage of knowledge around these topics they were in, and they still didn't know a fraction of what is the knowledge that is accrued over the past decade, the past 15 years in terms of what to consume, how to treat your body, and just the entire body of knowledge in the canon around health and wellness. And the thing is, not everyone has had access to that. Okay, not everyone gets the fucking Goop newsletters. Not everyone has access to Next Health, IVs, cryo, and things of this nature. So the day-to-day things that a lot of the people in our world, and I'll tell you right now, I would not be able to have the social life that I have and go this hard at the well, maybe not as I do it maybe a few years ago. I would not live that lifestyle without cold plunges and IVs and cryo and all this body of knowledge. And the thing is, this is still unavailable to probably 90% of society.
Absolutely. I'd say higher than that. And
yeah,
you're 100% right. And when, I mean, a lot of us have had a hard job before, or a hard summer, or, you know, a hard year in school. Put yourself in that position and then extrapolate that out over decades of your life. So not only do, you know, a lot of people do not have the access or the education on the availability of some of these things, but you got your head down, working your ass off, you know, 5, 6, 7 days a week, you're thinking about getting home and going to sleep, or, you know, getting something to eat and a cold beer and putting your feet up, man.
Or in my case, yelling at people on the internet.
Yes, correct.
Case.
Which can also be bad for your health, man. So we need to talk.
I'm going with it for right
now. Do a sidebar counselor on that one, and you know, try to fix that.
For sure. Okay, so that brings us to, obviously that brings us to our current situation. Not just a health crisis, the health crisis to end all health crisis. A worldwide health crisis that really nobody in modern memory has experienced. And even when we go back and look at something like the Spanish flu or certain pandemics of the past, it's hard, even when you're trying to give that era the benefit of the doubt of the gravity of what occurred, it's hard to really do it, right? Absolutely. So everything right now about our lives has to do with wellness and medical treatment. Okay, so obviously we're about 2 months into when this really hit the public conscience in the United States. We were hearing a lot of buzz and a lot of speculation at that time around what the disease did, what the physical risks were, what the health impact was. A lot of that has been validated. It ended up, you will elaborate on this, a lot of that ended up being exactly what we thought it was in terms of respiratory illness, the way the virus impacts the cells in the body, and, you know, the high risk categories age-wise and socioeconomically. So why don't we talk about what's been validated and go a little bit deeper than, you know, people usually go when they're just reading an article in the news in terms of, you know, your standard issue experience of COVID infection. What does it do? How does it impact the body? And what are the health risks?
Man, is this a quiz? I thought we were going to have fun on this.
we had the fun, man. We talked about yes, now we're down to business.
So yes, absolutely. You know, that's a good point that, you know, there haven't been any huge surprises with this virus. So what does this virus do? How does it infect us? How does it affect us? It gains entry to our cells by this receptor called the ACE2 receptor. And this is a receptor that's found in large part in our blood vessels. So if we follow that path, we can understand why we see some otherwise kind of strange manifestations of this virus, of this infection, like blood clots, right? Like kidney failure, liver failure, you know, strokes, aneurysms, heart attacks, heart problems. And, you know, obviously the main killer in this infection is the lungs. You know, we get a really bad pneumonia, people drown in their own lungs. They have to go on ventilators. We heard a ton about ventilators. It's really because this virus infects blood vessels, right? And so that has kind of fleshed itself out over the duration of this pandemic. And that's why we see all of these kind of strange, otherwise strange manifestations of this infection, which we think historically coronaviruses cause the common cold, upper respiratory infection, rarely.
Interesting. Wait, so another virus in this kind of family of viruses causes the common cold?
Absolutely. So
wow.
The coronavirus family, there's about 5 or 6 human coronavirus species that have existed for a long time, since longer than you and I were in diapers. And they're the most common cause of the seasonal common cold, right? But what makes this one different, and the reason it's so devastating to us, or it has been, is because it jumps from another species, we think. As far as we know right now, it's a zoonotic virus, meaning it came from an animal species into humans. It's not the first virus that's done this, but when this happens, all bets are kind of off, and we have to see, how this virus is going to behave in us versus our cat or bat, potentially in this case, or other animal. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the coronavirus is a species that's been around forever, right? And we're very familiar with it. SARS-1 was a coronavirus. That's why this is COVID-2, because, or SARS-2, because there was a SARS-1, which we all heard about,
Sure.
Yeah, essentially, so we know that it infects blood vessels. We know it infects the lungs, and the manifestations we've seen really have followed that pathology.
Interesting. Okay, so in terms of this virus, what you mentioned to me previously is what the virus is looking to do is looking to invade invade the cells and replicate. Mm-hmm. And once it does, it kind of stretches out the blood vessels, and that on the one hand has some negative impact in terms of it's almost like you have this default impact, which is on the lungs, and then you have all these kind of secondary impacts that may lead to a stroke, kidney failure, whatnot. Maybe you can talk about the distinction between when this becomes, if someone does either either this becomes fatal or it becomes grave and leads someone to admission in an ICU. If the distinction between when that is respiratory aligned and respiratory heavy, or one of these other infirmaries.
If I understand the question, what you're asking me, what's the distinction there? What do we see? What?
Well, you have all these people who have to go on ventilators because
correct.
Their real grave physical illness is inability to breathe in their lungs.
Yes.
And then contrast that versus how the coronavirus leads to things like kidney failure, strokes, blood clots, and all these other ailments that seem to be popping up.
Yeah. So when people end up on a ventilator, that seems to be the most common course of a moderate or severe infection leading to death with this, right? So typically the virus infects our upper airway and it likes to descend. This virus likes to go down in the body. So it starts up here, descends down in the lungs. That's the most common pathway we see for the severe kind of, you need to go on a ventilator, you're in the ICU. What's kind of frightening about the virus is when we see somebody that's totally fine, or someone that, had fever, cough, and then kind of did okay for a few days, and then they fall off again and sometimes die. Those are some of the situations where we see blood clots. Blood clots historically and typically are very sudden things. You don't I'm not feeling that well, and over days you deteriorate. A blood clot is very sudden. You're fine, and then you're not, right? That's a sudden heart attack, sudden stroke. So when we see these other manifestations, they tend to come up very quickly, and people get in a lot of trouble that way. And so it seems to be much more rare to have these, extra respiratory, if you will, manifestations, but they are happening, and they do happen. And, that leads us kind of to understand the big picture of these underlying conditions. And, why are people with these specific underlying conditions having a much worse time with this? Well, let's go back to how this virus gains entry and what viruses do when they gain entry, right? So it gains entry into our blood vessel cells, right, which are all over our body and in our lungs. And so when a virus gains entry, all they care about is replicating, man. They just want to make more of themselves, and then they burst the cell that they're in, and that releases all of these progeny, all these offspring that they made, just to go and to do the same thing in the cell next door or down the road. So, you know, when we see this in the lungs, we get that acute, you know, inflammation response. The body starts cranking out cytokines, which are these inflammatory markers, and we essentially kind of drown ourselves, because what do cytokines do? They make our blood vessels more leaky, right? They attract more blood flow to an area. Mm-hmm. And that's how we fight off an infection. You want more immune cells coming to that area. You want more blood flow.
The example that you gave to me was what happens to an area in your body and your skin when you scrape your knee, for instance. So maybe you explain that, and I think that'll really help frame how this immune response happens to cause infirmaries and impact in response to COVID.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've all tripped and scraped up before. Some of us, you know, more than others after a glass of wine, Matt. But, you know, you trip, you scrape your forearm, you scrape your knee, that area gets really hot and painful and swells a little bit, not just because you've banged your arm or your knee and you've broken blood vessels and it's going to bleed and swell, but also because when you scrape your arm or you scrape your skin, inevitably you're getting some foreign objects in there, living probably and not living, but either way, you're triggering an immune response to that area. So what do we get when we get that? Let's take the forearm. You scrape your forearm on the ground, it gets red, it gets hot. That's because your immune cells that are in that area are releasing these cytokine signals, right? They're attracting more immune cells to this area. They're saying, hey, there's a problem here. Let's get the fire department, let's get the cops, let's get everybody down here. And so you get this rush of blood flow. That area gets really hot. Those are cytokines being released, which, you know, this is good for a skin infection. This is good. You want lots of blood flow going to the skin. You want to wall that off. But when this happens in our lungs, it can really work against us. There's a fine line there. So anytime you have a pneumonia, which is an infection into the lungs, you're having that as a result of your immune system response. It's not necessarily the bug, the virus, or the bacteria that's in there that's just, you know, squirting water everywhere. No, it's your body that is making your lungs more leaky to allow more immune cells to get there. But ultimately that can cause us to kind of drown ourselves. So that's when you need to go on the ventilator. You can breathe as hard as you want, as long as you want. If there's too much fluid in your lungs, you can't catch up. You can't stay on top of it.
I think that's a fascinating aspect of all of this, and people not necessarily, it makes sense once you explain it, it makes complete sense. Yeah. But that you're thinking, you know, the first person, when I first started to learn a little bit about what actually is going on with this, when I was talking to someone at a testing lab, mm-hmm. that don't use any of the tests other than the jam, the thing up the nose test, because the only way they can tell whether or not they have a virus is if they can gather enough mucus to actually get a valid sample to see whether or not there's the virus is present. And I was like, okay, so mucus is usually in response to, it's trying to heal, it's a healing response, right, of some sort. But, you know, hey, like anything having to do with the body, I guess that's even, and maybe I'm wrong here and you can correct me, but even to a certain extent, how cancer foments is a little too much of a good thing.
Yeah. Cancer, I mean, it's a little different, and cancer can be very unique depending on the type of cancer. But you're right that it is too much of a good thing. You know, it's the body overreacting to something, causing a big problem in that sense. Just like if we've ever heard of people who die from sepsis, right, or septic shock, that the classic example is someone has a hole in their intestine, a bowel perforation, right? And there's all kinds of bacteria and crap in our bowel, obviously, well, literally, and obviously. And the body's response is so robust to that. It's so intense that you get your blood vessels dilating all over your body. And what happens if your blood vessels dilate? Your blood pressure goes down. It's just fallen victim to gravity. So you don't get enough blood to your brain or your major organs, and that's how you die from shock. But that's an example of how the immune system can overreact and tank us.
Mm-hmm. No, very, really fascinating. I think this is something that's probably a good piece of information for people to think about, and with and understanding their own health and some of the sicknesses that they get generally, but obviously very relevant to our current situation. I know that there's a lot there. Just going one kind of subtopic from what we're discussing. A lot of mothers follow me. I'm friends with a lot of young mothers, and they are very concerned about.
Shout out to mothers.
Shout out to
Mother's
mom.
Day.
I love
Yeah.
you. You're the gods and the earths. That made no sense. Anyway, anyways, all my moms out there have been very worried about a lot of reports around the early stages of this. Kids are low risk. Nothing's impacting kids. Recently, a few weeks into this situation, getting some reports that some women and some children are being infected and are getting this mysterious blood disease in terms of that impacts the blood vessels that seems to be reminiscent of Kawasaki syndrome.
Yes.
That is treatable, is something that we know about, but is certainly, hey, any sickness for a child is dangerous and concerning. And so you have some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So Kawasaki's disease is an autoimmune disease in kids, right? It's an arteritis, which is an inflammation of arteries. And it's typically caused, we don't know the exact mechanism, but we believe it's caused by immune system kind of attacking our blood vessels, kids' blood vessels. And that can lead to some pretty serious consequences, especially in kids. We don't usually see aneurysm, which is a weakening and kind of a stretching of an artery in kids' hearts, but we see that in Kawasaki's disease. That's something that we can see. And so what we've seen, this information that's been out in the news, there was a group of kids that were studied in this region in Europe because there was this massive increase in the reports of Kawasaki's disease, which is a very rare syndrome. And when they looked a little closer at it, these kids were in fact tested positive for COVID, and they were having Kawasaki's like syndrome. So not Kawasaki's disease, because again, that's an autoimmune disease, but the symptoms they were having were very similar to what we see in Kawasaki's disease, which again, if we say the trunk of the tree is the initial understanding of COVID, and it infects blood vessels and lung. If we just follow that out, this is another branch of that understanding, right? It's not a separate tree, but it's a branch of possibility, logical possibility. If we have a virus that affects our blood vessel system, it's logical, it's reasonable to kind of follow that path that, well, I guess it could cause an inflammation and inflammatory-like response in the arteries of kids. Very rare, very rare. And in large part, we still haven't had a lot of data and reporting on, kids being very affected by this infection, which is, thank God, it's a great thing. I hold a little bit back still because no matter what we're seeing, we have to keep in mind this is very, very early in this disease, and we need to reserve some judgment and some certainty for another year plus until we really kind of let this thing run its course and see how the hell else it could surprise us.
Absolutely. And so, some of the general takeaways around the sickness that seems to be impacting children, it obviously very dangerous and concerning, very rare, has only popped up in a handful of cases. Mm-hmm. Most of the children seem to be responding to treatment because, once again, this Kawasaki syndrome, this Kawasaki disease, the medical system has experience treating it. Yep. So, if you're a mother out there, obviously, and the threshold for freak out is very low and justifiable freak out, but maybe not something necessarily that we should be losing sleep around.
Correct.
Stay vigilant. And it seems to be something that's manageable, and we're going to keep our eyes on going forward.
Correct. And this is one situation where if I were a mother, I would be much more concerned about the flu than my kid having a bad, reaction to COVID.
Okay.
Sure. Just on
Would
in
love to
that
hear you
case
elaborate
only.
on that. I would love to hear you elaborate on that, because obviously, and maybe we'll get into this for a second. Okay. People love to make analogies. Everyone wants to be an MD, an epidemiologist. Everyone wants to have an opinion.
Sure.
And people that the flu, and comparing this to the flu either helps or hurts their point, or either comparing this to a flu or making distinguishing as opposed to the flu helps or hurts their point. So in terms of both in infectiousness, in terms of gravity, in terms of fatality, how does this truly compare to the flu? It appears to be, from our discussions, the flu is less infectious. The fatality rate seems to be, overstated. I mean, let's be honest. You talk to so many doctors, how few doctors ever hear of someone, you ask them, have you ever had a patient die of the flu? Most of them are going to say no. So maybe a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's apples and oranges. And I understand, we want to kind of rationalize this. It's a scary situation. It's a new situation. As human beings, we always gravitate toward comparison. We look up in the sky and we see shapes and lines, and our brain does that automatically.
Plato's forms, right? Everything has
Correct.
To and we base it off that form.
Yes. This is apples and oranges, so let's keep them distinct. So but if we are going to compare them side by side, number one, when we talk about infectious disease, we talk about infectiousness, right? How contagious is it? What we're seeing, with the flu, and again, we have decades of experience with the flu. We know so much about it. So it's not fair to compare something that is brand new to something that's been around for hundreds of years, right?
Exactly.
We have mountains of data.
The system knows how to handle the flu. We're trying to compress all these decades of knowledge of process, of systemic into months. And that is why it's driving me nuts.
Correct.
Try to make
and if they're going to force us to, though, whoever that is, basically, so some raw data. I mean, COVID-19 has killed in America, as many people in 3 months than the flu kills in about 6 months, right? Or slightly more people in 3 months than the flu kills in 6 months.
And so that's with shutting down society.
That's with shutting down society, correct.
That is with reducing the rate of human-to-human interaction, which would spread a virus, whether the flu or COVID-19, immeasurably. And everyone can say people are still out. If you compared how much a person interacts with another person on a day-to-day basis during just normal life, normal times, it is fractional. Even with a sloppy lockdown, it's not even comparable. Okay?
Not even close.
And that's, yeah.
And from an epidemiologic standpoint, studying disease, we say, how many people would an infected person likely infect? And in the beginning, we were thinking with COVID, one person would likely infect 6 other people, which is massive. Now that number is closer to about 3 to 4 people, which is still huge. The flu, again, years and years and years of data. We know pretty darn well that one person with the flu typically will infect one other person with the flu. That's manageable. We don't see, we don't see the hospitals, the emergency rooms in population dense areas like New York overwhelmed and overrun with people with the flu every year. We don't see them having to, put body bags and overrunning morgues in hospital space and storage rooms with the flu every year. So we must keep these very basic things in perspective. Whether you're a virologist or not is irrelevant to this point. There are some very obvious common sense things that we can draw. And I mean, look, I understand people are upset, people are pissed, and people have a right to be. We're Americans. We're rowdy. We should ask questions. But let's not be so sure of things that we can't possibly be sure of, and that we can really be wrong about.
Without a doubt. And I think also, let's understand that some of the measures that may be restrictive or concern us need to be taken because of that reservoir of unknown. And it might
Correct.
turn out that once the unknown becomes known, it might turn out that certain risks were overstated, or that things turned out better than we were anticipating. But you can't look back in hindsight and look at that, not even 2020, look at hindsight 2010 and kind of write off the fact that we ever should have been concerned about these things, because you have to factor in risk. It's almost like when you're an investor and you are looking, when you invest early, there's higher risk, you need higher returns. Someone who invests in a later stage company is going to be happy. Oh my God, 15% a year. Fantastic. If you're going, because you know that you're not going to lose it all. If you go in early when you know you have more to risk, you're only happier with bigger returns. And that's kind of, I think that's a very, I'm going to.
That's a great analogy. No, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Analogy. In terms, so I think we have to keep that in mind in judging what the right and wrong decisions were in terms of how we handled COVID. Okay, so we've talked about, what seems to have been proven out, things that we knew, we were pretty sure about. Not necessarily that we could stop them or not, but we a lot of this was proven out. What seems to have surprised us? What was not proven out? What did we think was going to transpire March 16th? Give realistic scenario, March 15th, 16th, that has now turned out to be maybe not completely blown to pieces, but ended up being not true.
Sure. The big thing for me, and this was really a blow to the gut. I think the mainstream media has been very softly introducing this, because, I kind of understand. On one hand, it's heavy. On the other hand, I think I was telling you earlier, we are innovators, we are go-getters, we're creative, we're fighters. So let's get the facts out, and then let's let the science community and everyone else get after it and figure out how to get around this hurdle, So the big thing for me was about a month ago, actually it's been about 2 months now, we started doing antibody testing at my clinic with a very, very trusted lab partner of mine who we've worked together for 5 years. He's just as passionate as I am about the science of these things. So I had, a hotline to him, one-on-one. We would talk almost every night. We were having 20, 30 people coming in for testing, sometimes more. We would discuss results. What we started to see, and what we have continued to see, is a very transient immunity. And what do I mean by that? So let's take a step back and talk about testing. There's two big types of tests. The main types of tests, one is PCR, where we're actually looking for the virus itself inside of somebody. And the other is antibody testing, where we're looking for a fingerprint from the virus in the form of our immune cells, right? Our antibodies. Our immune system makes antibodies whenever we're challenged or infected with the virus, bacteria, whatever. We make antibodies so that the next time we see that sucker, we can either never get a symptom from it and we just knock it out right away, or we get very mild symptoms, if any. So what we've seen is virtually nobody. There's one person, you know who you are, I bet you're watching, who we just tested on Friday, and we're still waiting for his results, but he had a very high antibody titer. His IgG level was very high. And so fingers crossed, he's still going to have antibodies, because he's at about 75 days now. But nobody that we've tested in my clinic or other, he's worked with some UCLA nurses and some other colleagues of his who he's tested, who had positive PCR and antibody tests, who have subsequently tested negative. So I'm blabbing, but the point is, we're seeing immunity, we're seeing antibody tests being positive, and then within 60 days, that immunity goes away. So we have to assume that you are then vulnerable again to being infected, which is on one hand, very devastating news. But once that landed with me, and I said, well, wait a minute, okay, let's get back to the medicine, let's get back to the science of this. It's just a challenge. That's all it is. It's a puzzle. We just need to figure it out. So, you know, the talk of vaccine, the talk of herd immunity, at this point, we need to be very clear, okay? Not only do we need to come up with a vaccine that triggers an antibody response, we need to come up with a vaccine that triggers a lasting antibody response. And we're not saying that that's not out there. There's different parts of the virus. You know, there's the spike protein, there's core proteins, there's envelope protein. There's different proteins that our body makes a response to. Maybe one of those triggers a longer, you know, more robust response than others. Maybe it's the amount of virus that we're challenged with, right? The viral load that triggers a more robust response, a stronger response.
Very interesting point.
So we just need to put our heads to it and figure it out. But, you know, so that causes a big problem for herd immunity, though, because herd immunity essentially is when enough people in the community have had a disease and they've survived it, they've cleared it, and now they have protective antibodies. And so the herd essentially is protecting the people who don't have antibodies, because the virus has to jump, right? It has to infect John to Mary to Molly to Dean.
Well, Dean, we all know, cannot be killed by conventional means. You can't Dean is a protective cover.
That's right.
And the point that you're making is that if herd immunity is that so many people have been immunized that there's just not that many people to get the virus from.
Correct.
Think about it. If you start off with the amount of people that you could potentially get the virus from is 100%, and you knock out 70%, even there's a lot of question around what percentage of a population or society needs to become infected and generate antibodies in order to establish herd immunity.
Sure.
A lot of different people have a lot of different perspectives on this, but just thinking about it common sense wise, if you drop from if you're around 10 people and at one point 10 of those people can potentially give you the disease, and at another point only 2 or 3 of those people can give you the disease, once again, do the math. It just becomes a whole nother ballgame in terms of how you can operate society, because so much of the risk has just been carved out of the system because there's so many people who can no longer pass the disease along to you.
Yes. Yeah, correct. That is the concept of herd immunity. Absolutely. And in order for that to work, it has to last longer than 60 days, you know, or we'll have this rolling, you know, exposure of vulnerability that will just perpetuate. So, totally. You know. And
so let's think about some other diseases here, right?
Yeah. With herd immunity?
Everybody, the flu, you get it one year, you might get it the next year, okay? Yeah, obviously the flu does not create lifelong, immunity. Chickenpox, on the other hand, strangely, from what I've heard, in terms of infection rate, flu is 1-to-1, chickenpox is like 10-to-1.
Yeah, incredibly infectious.
Crazy.
Very infectious.
If you're around someone who has the chickenpox, and you haven't had the chickenpox yet, good chance you're going to get the chickenpox.
Yes.
Nice thing about the chickenpox, you only get it once. Yep. Once you have the chickenpox, vast majority of the time, you establish immunity for life. Okay, yes. So I think we're just looking at the range of outcomes here in terms of what the body's immune response is in regards to getting one of these infections. And I think that's really fascinating.
Absolutely. And, you know, things like smallpox, which we virtually eradicated, you know, measles, polio, all of these, we were able to develop a vaccine that has conveyed, you know, virtually lifelong immunity. You know, with chickenpox, you know, you might have a reemergence of it later in life. And the interesting thing about chickenpox, it never goes away. It's one of those lovely herpes viruses that causes chickenpox, that it just lives in our nerve root ganglion, our nerves, for life. And then, you know, elderly people can end up getting what's called herpes zoster, which is a painful rash in the distribution of a nerve. And that's because what's happened, well, their antibody storage has kind of run out. You can also see it in people that are immunocompromised. You know, the immune system is down. Which, you know, it doesn't just have to be someone with something like full-blown AIDS. It can be someone who is sorry about that, for a long period of time, and that, you know, you're releasing cortisol, you're releasing the stress hormone, which can suppress your immune function. If that happens for long periods of time, yeah, you can, you know, end up getting a recurrence of one of these, of something like chickenpox. But yeah, the long-term, this, I got so many stalkers, man.
You got a few, man. You got some fans in the comments. We all got some fans. I mean, let's be honest, man. You know, like, it's the wildest party on the internet in 2020. So
that's right.
A couple of the top performers seem to have already tapped out, but we still got some people going. Rome,
right.
singing your praises. Lord Collins is
Collins. I know my boy Big Nay is here. You know, I could just feel his presence. So
yes,
know, there's a lot of folks. There's a lot of folks. Lots of love.
Presences in it's a fucking murderer's row. It's in all Carolina comments. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
Love that. Before we get to before we really dive into the deep end on the comment section, and there's friend Romina, who was one of the mean girls in high school, and every once in a while she'll admit to me, it's like, yeah, I was one of the mean girls in high school. No, she's a big fan of yours. Anyways, on to a couple more of
mean girl.
A mean girl. Okay, all right, topic. The girls who were kind of the popular, good-looking girls, like pretty girls, when I was in middle school and high school, were books could not be written about them because no one would believe it. Okay. Yeah. Los Angeles in the early to mid 90s, when things were kind of freewheeling, you would not, I mean, they wouldn't hang out with me. They're like, oh, you're about 8 years. You don't have, you haven't shot anyone. You don't drive. This was 1994. So like, you don't drive a Bronco on 24-inch rims with a sound system. So we're not hanging out with you. But I got to observe from afar, and they got their shot that down. That's a story for another time. We're going to get back to teaching people about their health. Okay, so to move on. Trust me, the stories are you would not believe them. Anyways, so getting on to in terms of stories, a couple topics that have been related to health that have been very topical in the news the last 48 hours. We'll go one, hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
And of course I was bullied a little bit. Why do you think I bully everyone now? Anyways,
that's right. I had a Gary curl, man, for many years in high school, so, you know.
Exactly. How do you think guys like me and you're this smart? Anyways, hydroxychloroquine is used to treat malaria, other viral infections. On the one hand, the case for it, it's used often. It's used in a lot of different scenarios. I speak with nurses who I'm friends with. They say, you know, yeah, I prescribe hydroxychloroquine all the time. I don't know why everyone's freaking out about this. In fact, some of them even take it themselves for autoimmune and rheumatoid arthritis, and they have no concerns about this. On the other hand, you know, people, the detractors of hydroxychloroquine, not much clinical support. Anecdotal support, but not much clinical support that it is helpful in treating COVID-19, and that if you can use it to properly treat COVID-19, you're dosing high, and that's when some of the health risks start to manifest.
Sure.
So you can dive in right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're going to use any medication, right, we need to have randomized controlled trials with a placebo. What the hell does that mean? People spit that phrase out. Randomized, meaning randomized and double blind. Let's just create an example. So myself and Dr. Matt are running a clinical trial, right? And that means that when someone comes in, right, let's say we're having COVID patients come in, and we look at our checklist of criteria for what makes someone possibly eligible to enroll in this study, and they meet those criteria. We then say, okay, we're going to get informed consent. This is what we'd like to give you. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what we think we'll see or we won't see. And once we have that, then we give them a prescription, right? And neither I nor you, neither the doctor nor the patient knows whether they're getting hydroxychloroquine or a sugar pill, let's say. And that is randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, because there is such a thing as the placebo effect. The mind is a strong organ, right? And we believe that something is going to help us, or we believe that something is going to harm us, we can be, our body can actually be swayed in that way. So we need to kind of distill that out and figure out, is it the medication or is it the placebo effect? So if we understand that, moving forward with hydroxychloroquine specifically, there have been some low-powered studies. What does that mean? It means that they're not very large. There's not a lot of people in them, you know, maybe 1,000 or so. But what we've seen is generally no positive effect, right? We haven't seen a lot of negative effect either, right? There are risks. In one study, they did see, you know, a slight increase in cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac events, and that can be a side effect of hydroxychloroquine. That's why it's really important, again, to do this inside the setting of a controlled trial, because we will control for those kind of things, right? You'll write something into the study like weekly EKGs, you know, or you wear a Holter monitor that's constantly monitoring your heart rhythm, so we can monitor for adverse events and stop the study if we see a lot of those. So we need to make it safe, because yes, potentially we will try to use higher doses of hydroxychloroquine to be effective in COVID versus what we traditionally use it for now: malaria, both malaria treatment and prevention, some autoimmune diseases. Just because it's been safe and relatively well received for those conditions does not translate you know, apples to apples to treating for another condition, especially something that we haven't seen before. So that's really what's missing with hydroxychloroquine. And unfortunately, the studies we have seen have not been very impressive. They've not been very helpful. I mean, damn, I know a lot of doctors, of course, a lot of people would love to come on and say, miracle, boom, this is going to work. We found something to treat. But we don't have that yet. And so right now there's only a potential downside. The upside we can't ascertain. So when we look at risk benefit, the benefit is question mark. The risk is, you know, 5, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 20. So we can't justify just widespread prescribing of it in an experimental way unless we are controlling that experiment and monitoring it to make sure no one's, you know, getting harmed by it. There is a medication. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. A question in terms of there's 2 other kind of subtopics around hydroxychloroquine. One is its pairing with zinc, and 2 is hydroxychloroquine, very useful in the early stage. If you take it during the early stages of infection before it multiplies in the cells, as you mentioned, not helpful if you take it later on. What are your thoughts on those 2 issues?
I think it makes logical sense. Well, hydroxychloroquine plus zinc, or hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin, which is an antibiotic for bacteria, not for viruses, they've done that in these studies, and they still haven't shown a benefit, a significant benefit. And then, what was the second part?
The second part, so it's zinc, and then it was, you take it early.
Oh yeah, the timing of it. The timing of it, correct. So
you take it once you're already really sick. Hydroxychloroquine's not.
That's right. We've seen
take
studies.
It early. It's going to prevent it from getting bad.
Hopefully. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the cytokine storm, or the release of these cytokines, these cell signals that can wreak havoc, especially in the lungs, right? You can drown yourself with too much cytokine release, overreacting, overstimulating, too much fluid. So yes, logically, it makes sense that we have a medication, hydroxychloroquine, which one of its mechanisms of action, one of the ways it works in our body is it kind of dulls down the immune cells that release cytokines, right? So if we can blunt those immune cells from over-releasing cytokines, then yes, potentially we can prevent that cytokine storm. You know, one hurdle there is we don't know, you know, it's been very random who has the big cytokine release that warrants, you know, ventilator, ICU treatment, and who just has a fever with a bad cough. So these are all things that will be hopefully fleshed out in more of the studies that are ongoing, you know, and they'll continue to do better studies. But the studies that have been done so far haven't shown much. But yes, the studies, especially if they're starting late in the course of someone who's sick with COVID, I mean, both logically and actually probably not going to help much.
Interesting. I think there is just so much misinformation coming from every angle around hydroxychloroquine, and it's crazy. And I find it very unfortunate that the discourse has gotten that distorted. So
it's just strange. It's weird. I mean, there are other medications that, like remdesivir. Okay, remdesivir is an antiviral medication that you know, we didn't develop it for COVID. Obviously, it's used for other RNA viruses, but they did. So there was the first study that was done was out of in Asia, and that one did not show a real significant benefit from taking remdesivir. But it was a weak study, you know, low power. Everyone knows what power means now, so you can use cocktail parties. And they didn't meet a lot of their endpoints, so the study was pretty weak. It didn't show a benefit, though. There's another study that hasn't been published yet, but the early reporting on it out of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, that's Dr. Fauci's the head of that institute, they're saying that they have some very promising results, and that something like a 35% reduction in severe morbidity, mortality with remdesivir, starting it at the right point of infection and relatively safe, you know, well tolerated. So I wish remdesivir was getting more airtime, because that is something that actually has shown some promise. And another thing that could be very, very beneficial and is showing some promise, and I'm enrolling in this study myself, excuse me, is convalescent serum. So we take, you know, Matt, I'm going to keep giving you the disease. So let's say you have COVID, right? You clear it, you have an antibody response, you donate your plasma. We can take that plasma, we can replicate your antibodies, and then give them to someone who's sick in the hospital with COVID. So that is very promising. And we've done that with other diseases in the past. We've done it with Ebola. And so hopefully that is something else that we'll see kind of flesh itself out over the next few months here. But the hydroxychloroquine thing, the main point is, look, we haven't seen a significant benefit. Yes, it's established and safe for other conditions, right? But, you know, those people who need hydroxychloroquine, people with really bad autoimmune diseases, they need it. People with malaria, they need it. People who are trying to prevent themselves from getting malaria really need it. You know, let's not exhaust the supply. Let's let those studies, you know, run. Let's see what happens. Let's stop talking about it for now. You know, I mean, if it's going to be beneficial, it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, we're not, man, the conversation is going to continue, because it's just relevant enough to be on everybody's radar.
Yeah.
Attached to our boy DJT. Everyone who wants to say, oh, look, Donald Trump's a goon, is fucking everything up.
Yeah.
Attach hydroxychloroquine to him. Then, you know, you're going to get people saying, okay, you're clearly ignorant, because this is something that's been around for a lot of years. It's not this ridiculous thing where you just go take a couple doses and you have a heart attack. That's not true. And of course, the truth is somewhere in between.
Correct.
The loud people over here and the loud people over there. And in between, the people trying to have normal conversations is the truth.
The logic is lost, right?
Absolutely. Speaking of people trying to have normal, productive conversations like me and you are having right now, we're 5 minutes away to the end of the hour. I figure we're going to go a little over. So why don't we just keep going? Well, what I would do is I'll stop this live right now. I'll save it and post it to IGTV. I'm just going to start live back up.
Okay.
And you'll tap back in and we'll just keep going. That sounds good?
Great. That sounds good to me.
All right. I love it, guys. Okay, everybody, I'm going to shut this down in a second, go to IGTV, and then I'm going to start it back up. So hop back in a second.
All right. Let's not lose you, Mary Loomis. Okay.
No. Everybody's back in. Nobody's going in.
All right.
Okay. Now we will be back to continue to educate the people.
Let's go.
Let's do it, man. How much fun do we have educating the people?
I mean, that's what we live for, man.
What we live
That's
for.
what we live for.
Love educating. Love educating the people. All right. So that's hydroxychloroquine. Okay. My buddy, good friend Dave Ortiz. The concerns of some of the minority communities, the Latino community, the African American community.
Absolutely.
In fact, they've been hit harder. It's affected these communities more significantly. You can look at a little bit of it is pure environmental and socioeconomic. Is there a genetic component to it, and that this is impacting some minority communities, and particularly in connection with the African American community? From what I've seen, and I don't understand. This is where I'm not quite as medically. I'm not educated enough to really understand, but genetically, it does have a greater impact on them. Maybe you can elaborate and clarify some of this for us.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the numbers are disgusting. Okay, with respect to the disproportionate effect on our Black and brown brothers and sisters in this country with COVID. 3 times as likely to contract the virus, 6 times as likely to die from the virus. And what this does is it sheds a light on these existing healthcare disparities, right? If we stay on our tree of understanding, right, of what this virus does, how it infects, how it affects us, let's go back to the blood vessel issue and the lung issue. Well, we see higher rates of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, high cholesterol in Black and brown Americans. We see higher rates of asthma. We see higher rates of diabetes and obesity. And so those are the pre-existing conditions that this virus, does its worst with. So logically, naturally, we can follow that if we have a population amongst us that has higher rates of these devastating conditions, they're going to be more affected. And that's really what we're seeing. That's really what we're seeing here. For too long, we have, put off these healthcare disparities. And when something like this hits, it casts a very bright light on it. And this is what we see. And so, I think we need to mobilize. We need to get into action mode. We see it, we hear it. What are we going to do about it? And I think there needs to be a multifaceted response to this. I can dive into, but if you have a follow-up on that.
No, I got some time, and but my buddy Dave Ortiz, who posed, not that this was not a question that was on my mind, but Dave posed the question directly. A good friend of mine, someone whose voice and concerns, I want to put to the forefront. If you have some further thoughts on this topic, on how we address how this has lifted up the veil on society for seeing all the ugliness.
Yeah.
Okay. Disparities in medical treatment across the socioeconomic and cultural spectrum. Okay. If you have thoughts on that, hey, we're
Absolutely.
here. Let's hear it.
Yes. So, when I said in the beginning, I talked about Charles Drew University, set up our mission as service to the underserved and help bridging some of these disparities. Well, I think that really has to go far beyond just putting good doctors, good nurses into economically impoverished or socioeconomically, medically underserved areas, right? We have to put, we have to have more care availability. We have to have more care centers, but we need to also think about changing the face of our communities, right? We need to think about providing education and availability of healthy foods and healthy options, right? We can't just have good doctors with full, busy-ass clinics because, man, look, I love what I do. I love being able to spend, as much time as I can with the patient. But if I can't spend even 15 minutes because there's 50 people in the waiting room, how much good can I really do? How much effect or impact can I really have? So, and there's really no excuse for that in this day and age of our digital age, you know, being able to communicate and spread education and the word to people. So I think number one, yes, we need more doctors, nurses available in our underserved communities. We need, I think, you know, on a community, I hate to even use the word government, I know that's a hot button word, but on a we need to hold our local elected officials from there all the way up more responsible and accountable for helping to change the structure, I guess, if you will, of our underserved communities. We need to have healthier food options. Like I said, we need to have, you know, education on what it means to have high blood pressure. What, you know, what is diabetes? What are foods?
Are high blood pressure and diabetes, are these particularly prevalent due to, you know, lifestyle conditions and socioeconomic conditions in the minority communities? Because it feels like, once again, I wish I knew more. I'm trying to, it feels like that's a yes.
Trying to learn.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. These are much more prevalent in Black Americans specifically. Okay. Levels of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, much more prevalent. And, you know, genetics play a very, very small role. They do play a role when it comes to high blood pressure in African Americans and Black Americans. But when we look at the big picture, there's so much that environmentally contributes. You know, we talk about environmental versus genetic, and then I don't know if I answered the first part of your question earlier, but no, there's absolutely no genetic link to COVID sensitivity or COVID fragility. It's all about the underlying conditions, right? And so the why this is so prevalent goes into what we're putting in our bodies, what we're eating, our lifestyles. You know, what contributes to high blood pressure? Stress, right? Not sleeping, eating the wrong foods, not exercising, you know, all of those things. You know, so if you're living below the poverty line, or you're living check to check, and whether you have one kid, 5 kids, or no kids, all, you know, all of those situations exist, and you can be absolutely struggling, mentally stressed. That's going to increase blood pressure. Not only does it increase your blood pressure, but it also increases your cortisol level, our stress hormone.
Sure.
And when cortisol is high, like I said earlier, immune function is depressed. But that's not it. When cortisol is high, blood sugar is higher, right? So you and I can have the same diet, but if I'm incredibly stressed all the time, my blood sugar is going to be higher on average than yours. And so, you know, sugar is the damaging thing in diabetes is sugar. Sugar does all the damage, man. There's no, you know, mystery there. So by empowering our Black and brown brothers and sisters through education, that's the first step. So, you know, a lot of my patients, I think I was telling you earlier, I had a super busy clinic today. 90% of those patients had high blood pressure on their reading, just coming in. And of those 90%, I would say 60% didn't know they had high blood pressure and weren't being treated. And the main reason is I don't feel anything. You know, I don't go to the doctor because I'm never sick. Well, you have high blood pressure. Well, yeah, I'm fine though. You know, they don't have to be overweight to have high blood pressure.
They're so adapted to it. They're so used to
it.
Way day to day.
Yeah.
And this is where things that kind of seem a little, you know, kooky to us, a little kitschy to us that are in this kind of health and wellness zone, right? Like I said, this aggregate knowledge, something is as simple as meditation, right? The amount of times that I've meditated, or I've spoken with others who have meditated, and they kind of realize, oh my God, I've been clenching my jaw for the past 36 months.
Yes.
It's insane. There
Yeah.
are so many things that you, so much tension in the body, so many things that may be wrong with you that you adapt to, that you can continue with for years, if not decades, without noticing. If you don't have that consciousness and that awareness to realize you need to take steps to move away from that. And it's not like it's everyone, if you don't think like that, that it's your fault. Not
That's right.
until about 10 years ago, fucking nobody thought like this. Okay.
No, exactly.
Until about 10, 15 years ago, the only people who were even conscious of this stuff were crazy hippies with long hair and a bunch of weed, and that's it. God bless them. And they
Yeah.
charted a course for all of us. But a lot of these more conscious wellness tactics that are very commonplace to a lot of people in the more aspirational communities now are very easy, very helpful, but have not filtered out to the majority of our fellow citizens, right?
Right.
And
That's
so
right.
very simple stuff, even something, a couple clients of mine, good friends of mine, AJ Roland and Yanni Hagos, and they decided even something like Alfred Coffee, the community center of boutique, better quality coffee with some, a cafe with more healthful food. That's something that in West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, there's one every 2 blocks.
Yeah.
You can't get enough of these goddamn places. You wonder why they're still in business. Then he said, "There's nothing like this in lower income communities. So let's take something like that, and even just presenting that knowledge that this is a lifestyle to live, or this is a big component of lifestyle and health, is just so valuable. And you start adding, you build it brick by brick here. And bringing this type of knowledge that we've accumulated in the more health conscious, aspirational, parts of society, and bring them to other parts of America right now that may, just by not even bad decisions or bad judgment, just by living, kind of put themselves at risk. And this has been exposed by the situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so easy to get into a cycle, especially if you're making ends meet, man, to get into your job cycle, to get into your life cycle of getting up, your routine, going to work, eating what you eat during the day or missing meals, and, getting home, unwinding, exhausted, beat down, cooking dinner for the kids or for yourself, having a drink, going to bed, doing the same thing over again. Years go by, right? Years are consumed in those kind of cycles. So in order to effect a change, we need to break those cycles. We need to break that way of living. And the only way to do that is to point it out as a problem. So we need to, to be able to connect with people and say, hey, this is a problem. And I think COVID has provided an opportunity. If we try to look at some of the positive spins of this,
and I believe there are many potential positives.
Yes, absolutely. And one of those potentials has been, when I do talk to patients, in my underserved clinics, and we talk about blood pressure being high and diabetes, but I also say, well, look, this can put you at risk for dying from COVID, much higher risk than if you didn't have this. That gets attention. And whatever it is, I don't have the answer. No one person has the answer, but I think all of us have the responsibility to try to bring whatever value we have innately and share that with our neighbors, our neighboring communities, our neighbors next door, to say, hey, maybe if I reach out with this piece of value, with this piece of knowledge, maybe that will resonate. Maybe that'll be what that person needs to hear to change their mind that day. Maybe that person's down, having a crap day. Maybe that person thinks there's no way out of this, this routine, and to maybe talk to them about 2 minutes of mindfulness a day. Start with 2 minutes, and go from there, see how you feel. And then hold them to it. Once you give them that piece of knowledge, hold them responsible by saying, hey, so how'd it go? Did you try that? What'd you think? Oh, that was great. Or no, I didn't try it yet. Well, give it a try. Give it a shot. I'm telling you, it really helped me. Just try it. It's 2 minutes, something simple like that. Something simple like, sometimes when I have a really busy clinic, I do only have a few minutes, but I can say, okay, here's what I want you to try. I promise you will lose some weight. You're going to feel better. You know, intermittent fasting. Talk to them about, well, what's intermittent fasting? Never heard that crap before. You know, just eat between this time window, you know, try that. Try, you know, give them a big window.
Is, you know, hey, maybe you don't have a fucking, maybe you can't go to Creation and get a $12 green juice or go to Erewhon.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not available to you. All you got to do is 7 o'clock, eat dinner, don't eat the rest of the night, wake up, don't eat for a few hours, and you know something? Some of your cells have regenerated that wouldn't have otherwise regenerated. Okay. And you've lowered your blood pressure, you've lost weight, and you've helped your health by doing nothing. And these are no cost, no lifestyle.
That's right.
Friction actions. And I think that's really, listen, if we start getting too much into the economic conversation, that needs to be addressed as well. However, it gets really complicated.
That's right.
If we give people the basic tips on how to do very low effort, low commitment, low cost, change their habits in that manner, and really change their biochemistry, I think that's a really great place to start. And this is another thing that I think, if people are gonna feel that, and they're gonna gain trust in the system by realizing even something, you know, as simple as, if I go meditate, wait a second, I'm gonna feel how relaxed I was for a minute or two.
Yes.
Forget that. I'm not gonna forget that anytime soon, and I'm gonna realize that I need to start going in this direction, looking for more options.
Once you feel that other side of things, it's almost addictive. You know, it's almost addictive to want to feel better without having to take anything, without having to, you know, totally turn your life upside down. It's these small milestones that we can share with people. And you're right, man. If we stay on the big picture, which is depressing, and, you know, it seems insurmountable, some of these inequities, yes, but you're right. If we empower people and give them these small, tangible goals, these things are cumulative, man. And before you know it, the blood pressure's down. You lost 20 pounds, you know, you feel better, you're sleeping, you're not snoring because you lost weight. And snoring, sleep apnea, is a big cause of high blood pressure and sudden death heart attack. So no, I didn't put you on 2 different, you know, blood pressure medications, an anti-cholesterol medication, you know, 2 diabetes medications. And guess what? Next year, we're going to try insulin injections because we just can't control your blood sugar. No, you're going the other direction now. You know, I have a patient, to share a story. She's 62 years old. She found herself 100 pounds overweight. She's 250 pounds, I think. She's about 5'5". And for the last 10 years of her life, she found herself at least 100 pounds overweight, sometimes more. Terrible back pain, terrible knee pain. I talked to her about intermittent fasting, and we talked about, you know, not eating breads, rice, tortillas, pasta. You know, I know LeBron looks really cute on the billboard with drinking the Gatorade and the Sprite, but that'll kill you. No, that's not good for you. I know it tastes good when you're thirsty, and the commercials say it's good, but that is sugar. That's high fructose corn syrup. That'll kill you. So she cut these things down first, and then started to eliminate things. We're talking over 8 months. And she comes back in 2 months ago. I almost didn't recognize her, man. She lost 70 pounds. She started just with eating only 8 hours a day. So I said, okay, let's start with 12 to 8. That's your intermittent fasting window. You know, let's start making some small changes in what you're eating and what you're drinking. And she pushed it to now she only eats between 2 and 6 p.m., which is extreme, but it was necessary for her. But I wasn't going to tell her, you need to, you know, you can only eat 4 hours a day. Look at you. You're way overweight. You're going to die. No, we started with small snowballing things. I didn't see her for about 2-3 months, and so happy. Her pain went away. She's sleeping, and you just have this glow. And those are the kind of things that almost anybody can do. You know, you don't have to have insurance to do that. You don't have to have the best doctor who's going to give you the best medication for that. You know, medication for me is a stopgap. It's where possible, and most of the time it is, sometimes it's absolutely not possible, but where possible, I'd like to just use medication for a short term. We need to have a plan for your medication. I don't want to just say, you have this, so we're prescribing this, and I'll see you next year. We need to have a plan for that, because people want that hope. I think there's a stigma. I'm on medication. You know, there's a stigma behind that, which can kind of be a deterrent to getting people to go to the doctor and monitor their health, because they don't want to come to that self-realization, well, I'm on blood pressure medication, man, or, you know, I'm on this medication or that. Even with mental illness, you know, some severe mental illnesses, look, you're going to have you on medication indefinitely. But when we're talking about, I've been depressed recently, I've never had depression, now I'm so bummed all the time, I want to do anything. Well, let's get you out of that funk. We need to maybe get you on some meds for a while, but let's address the underlying things. Let's see what we can tinker, what we can change, you know, what we can inspire. And then gradually, let's try to get you down off of that medication. And that's incredibly empowering and uplifting for people. That's really the direction I think medicine needs to go in, you know, or it's just going to be more of the same old crap, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, do you think we're over medicated in this country?
Absolutely. Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
big time. And I don't blame the doctor. You know, I don't blame my colleagues for that. I think our medical education system is outstanding, and at the same time, there's an undercurrent of a prescription type of system where there's a pill for every condition, right? You see this, you diagnose this, here's your option of what to prescribe. I wouldn't want to be in any other country in the world if I had an emergency. We are the best at saving your life in an emergency. You don't want to be anywhere else. But
right, a lot of people are underselling the American. When it's good, it's very good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we are top of the line, but. And this does not say anything about the brilliant minds and the spirits and the drive of our medical professionals. I think it speaks towards system. It speaks towards our educational and our regulatory systems, like the state boards and these kind of things. They hold physicians a lot of times to unrealistic expectations, and the educational components, they don't run parallel. They don't jive with the real life practice. And so we end up practicing kind of a CYA type of medicine. You know, I prescribe this, it's safe. I don't want to do this, even though it's logical, because I might get in trouble, you know. And yes, so I think we end up we lean on our prescription pad too much. And I'm not talking opiates, that's a separate monster topic. I just mean in general, we can lean on our prescription pads too much because that's what we were taught. That's what our research and our data shows works, when in fact, I think there needs to be a much heavier educational relationship component where I'm your partner in this, I'm your coach. I'm going to, really listen to you as an individual, your individual situation, and come up with individualized tools and a plan, a map that fits you and maybe nobody else, with set benchmarks to get you at your best and get you off the cliff, you know?
Totally. And I think, I think, and this is where it's a weird interplay, because as we've mentioned, all this knowledge and all this consciousness around this that we have that has manifested itself, yet the system almost seems overwhelmingly on the wrong path.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, where does the fucking rubber meet the road, man? How do we have all this knowledge yet the day-to-day system that treats the average citizen seems to be on such the wrong path? So it's very difficult to reconcile those two things. Taking one step forward then and through that line of questioning, I mean, all these people that I know do speak so highly of you and fucking swear by you in terms of, your ability to help them live right, make the lifestyle decisions and the day-to-day decisions that they need to make, and also, to treat them properly. We're not asking you to give up the secret sauce and the formula to Coke right here. If you got to tell people what you think they should be doing and how, and what steps they can take in the here and now, regardless of money, regardless of access to medical care, what would you be telling them?
First of all, who are these people? I want to know who's saying these things about me. No.
Wait, what? Oh, come on, man.
So,
other than Oakenfold, I've never heard him speak this highly of anyone.
Okie, I love Oakenfold, man. He doesn't trust me as a doctor, but no.
Well, listen, he makes me want to be a fucking rich, like generational wealth Eurotrash guy from the 90s. I'm like, if I could have been at an original Oakenfold in the 90s show, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I want to be in an Oakenfold show in 2020, don't get me wrong. But, man, how much fun was that? I could not even.
Oh. Yeah. A pioneer, man. I mean, he's someone who walks the talk. He's changed. He totally ushered in, house music in a big way to the States, but he also was somebody who behind the scenes does a lot with his influence and with his, wealth and his heart. He does a lot of things.
Seems like a great guy.
Absolutely.
Telling me I would never get into his raves in the 90s.
Yeah.
Probably not. I wouldn't have. They had.
Kevin's a tough guy at the door, man. He's the guy behind the guy. So
yes, and then there's a guy behind
his good side. So, absolutely. The toolbox I give, there's no magic wand. It takes work. And I think that's important to level with people. Look, it's easy to say, eat right, exercise, get enough sleep, try something like intermittent fasting. What's more challenging is to be real with yourself. So what I do is I have patients write me a journal, write down what you eat in a week. Be honest. Let's be honest. Let's look at that. And, so writing down what you eat kind of makes you think twice about what you're going to eat. It has that effect. It's like, damn, I'm going to have to write this down. Like, I'm eating this, I'm having McDonald's today or whatever. So journaling what you eat can shed a lot of light on problem areas. And what are problem areas? I have people avoid processed carbs, breads, pasta, tortillas, rice, drinking high fructose corn syrup, hidden sugars, like the energy sugars.
So many.
Oh God.
Dressings, ketchup, sauce, everywhere.
Absolutely. And then fruit juices. I have patients who say, well, I just drink fruit juice all the time, I'm getting healthy. No. Look, you can have a piece of fruit, that's great, but when you concentrate it, it's just too much sugar, man. It's too much of a sugar load. Yep. So I tell people, avoid the processed carbs. If you're going to drink a juice, drink a vegetable juice. But vegetable juice doesn't mean adding apples and all this other crap in there. It's really, it's not that delicious at all. But if you can't get your veggies in a day, an easy way to do it is just pound it. And if you're, like you said, you can't, everyone can't hit up Erewhon and, these fancy juice places and pay $15 for their green glowing, juice for the day.
Sure.
Maybe invest in a juicer and get your veggies at the market and have your vegetable juice once a day. That's very, very reasonable. Number two, pick a window of time to eat. Pick a window of time to eat. This way you eliminate snacking, and most importantly, have a cutoff time. So I like to use 8 p.m. as the absolute latest. A lot of people don't know, but our body, we have these ancient bodies that even though our minds and technology has evolved, our thinking mind has evolved, our primitive brain is still our primitive brain. And so when we're running functions in our body, the metabolism really slows down and shifts after, say, 9 p.m. So when you eat late, you're going to store more of that crap as fat. You're going to store more sugar in your liver. Okay, so trying to have an earlier cutoff time is important.
The late night eating is just death, isn't it?
It's crushing. Oh, it's crushing. Yeah, you know, it's that, you know. So have a window of time to eat. And then what you eat during that window is crucial. And then exercise, very important. You know, telling people things like, you know, there's a Harvard study a couple of years ago that showed just 120 minutes of cardiovascular exercise a week. And that can be a brisk walk. For those people who are really out of shape, you know, a couple walks around the block, you're breathing, your heart's pumping. Good. Get 120 minutes of that cumulative in a week. And guess what? We start to see reversing of vascular damage in the body. They actually did MRIs of the brain that showed increased size of areas in the hippocampus and the frontal cortex, the places where we form and generate recall memories, just with 120 minutes a week of cardiovascular exercise. So what you're eating, when you're eating, start to integrate some exercise and pick what's best for you, man. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to hike. You don't have to run. And try different things. If you don't like it, then try something else. You know, just because you don't like walking doesn't mean you don't have to exercise anymore. Pick something else. And then the stress thing, that's the last thing. Learning how to manage stress, and mindfulness is an excellent tool for that, because mindfulness teaches us how to let go of things we can't control. It teaches us how to stay in the present and not worry about shit that happened, you know, that day or happened in the past at any point in time, and not worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next day or the next day, because those things will probably never come to pass as you're imagining them. So why worry about them? I'm not saying don't plan things. Absolutely use your mind to plan out your day, your week, your month, your next few minutes. But don't sit there and just perseverate and focus on all these possible scenarios of the future. We get stressed and catch yourself. Think about it. You'll be like, oh man, my palms are kind of sweaty. My heart's racing. I'm like clenching, you know, the clenching thing. Why? Because I'm thinking about, you know, such and such said this. What if I did this in response? What if she finds out that? You know, what am I going to do if this happens? Let it go. And it's a practice. It's not easy, man.
Your ancestors only had to worry about getting killed by freaking polar bears.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
For 98% of our species history, we didn't have to worry about any of this garbage.
That's right.
And most of the way that God, not to get too spiritual about this.
Go with it.
But, all right, thank you.
Go with the spirit.
All right. Most of the way that we are wired is a result of living conditions that are not even nearly reflective of what we see right now. I mean, the idea of a cell phone, of responsiveness to digital stimuli, anything. Even, I mean, God, people seem to forget. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was about 140 years ago.
Yeah.
Crazy. Air conditioning happened about 70 years ago. Okay. Yep. Up until about 70 years ago, guys, if it was hot, it just stayed hot.
Your ass was sweating.
You didn't get to go make it cooler. Okay. If it was hot, you just had to fucking deal with it.
That's right.
People don't realize these things, that we don't look back at history and understand. We're trying to understand why our bodies are and our minds are the way that they are the results of hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of evolution that happened under conditions that are not reflective of what's going on now in the least.
Correct.
And I think, like, it's when I have been able to really live this, it has benefited me a lot to understand that. And then it's when you get these just massive benefits from things like meditation, mindfulness, and whatnot.
Yes.
Okay, wait a second. I just forgot about all these things that don't matter because they don't matter.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, all this wisdom and all this health and all this wellness and all this benefit just rose to the surface.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I bet you weren't able to do that the first time you tried it, right? It takes some practice, man.
Well, here's the, I was weird because I did, but I got really into it at the beginning when I just tried it for the first time. I was into this type of stuff at an earlier age than you might believe. And I dived into it more strongly, but I wasn't able to maintain it. And then I had to reconnect with it at various junctures of my life later on.
Yeah.
Every time I've reconnected with it, I've been happy that I have, and you try to get consistency out of it. But I think when primitive truths hit you, they really hit you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they don't go away. You hang on to them.
They're in your blood.
Yes, you nailed it with the stress response, man. We're used to escaping the saber-toothed tiger and going on about our day. That's how our stress response system was designed. That's how we evolved. And so it's a total malfunction for us to have these high cortisol levels, these high adrenaline levels throughout the day for hours and hours, for days, for months. And, that's why, that's when we start to see the development of these chronic conditions, man. The system wasn't meant to sustain these stress levels.
Not at all.
Recognizing that is a powerful tool, like you said, because when you recognize it, you're aware of it, you can do something about it. But it takes an effort. It's not granted for most people. It's not granted, but it's easier as you go along.
For sure. And shout out to a couple guys. Crawford, we saw Crawford the other day.
Crawdaddy. Yeah.
We saw Brian Ellis. These are guys.
Yes.
This is very much of his approach to these things that, hey, if we're going to breathe, if we're going to indulge, if we're going to embrace breathing practices and whatnot, it is to reconnect with our primitive biofeedback responses that were developed over, through evolution over hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years.
Yes.
And, to be aware of why we are the way that we are.
Yes.
Okay. And when we try to understand why we react to things in the modern world the way that we do, to synthesize them with our understanding of our primitive nature. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think workplaces incorporating that is crucial. Gyms going beyond just being gyms. Big shout out to Dog Pound Gym. They're very popular. They're I don't know how else to say it, but one side, they're very popular, they're very mainstream, but they also are cool as F. I don't want to cuss on your channel, man, but
I've already set the bar for that. Don't even
because during this
during
this pandemic, one of the things they're doing is offering mindfulness to all of their staff, a led mindfulness session. And, I think that's a great example. That's a great example of setting the bar high and incorporating these things into health, incorporating these things into wellness.
For sure.
Yeah.
Something we did, this is an amazing chat, Dr. Ford. Educational, entertaining, engaging, helped me reconnect with some of the things that I had kind of cycled through in terms of, how I had thought about health and wellness over the years.
Awesome.
These are the types of chats that I'm hoping to have.
I loved it.
Dude.
I loved it, man.
Absolutely. And hopefully brought some entertainment to everybody, brought some information to everybody.
Yes.
Instagram, as I've investigated with my agents, has decided, oh my God, so many people are going live. We have to let them save it to IGTV now instead of just putting it up on their story for 24 hours. Finally, they got around to that. So everyone's going to be able to enjoy this.
Yeah.
We'll have it on IGTV. We're going to have it on YouTube. And we're going to find some more time to chat with Dr. Ford sometime in the future, because this is an evolving situation. We're going to be getting more information. We're going to need to analyze it. And, you know, Dr. Ford, I want to thank you, and I look forward to speaking with you as the situation evolves.
Thank you, my brother. I hope you will have me back. I'd love to be back. And agent, Kevin Collins, why don't I have an agent, man? That's what? Dude. Okay, we're gonna talk after this call. Thank you very much, man, and thanks, you know, everybody for listening in.
Without a doubt, the comments were great. The chat was great. This was awesome. Everybody have a great night.
All right, my brother. Good night, everybody.
Give it just a second, see if there's any cool comments. Everybody, Dave, I'm glad you enjoyed it, guys. Kim, you were great. Rebecca, the spicy Latina. Spicy. Dean, thank you, man. That was great. He is awesome. That was a very informative talk. We'll give it another second or two. The comment section on my IG lives are the funnest place on the internet. Just wanted to throw everybody there. Okay, everybody, that was great. Hope everyone had a great time. I certainly did. Hope you got a lot out of it. I'll talk to you soon.